So special thanks to John Nail, who as I'm walking in, he says, I always enjoy a good practical joke. So I'm thinking, my zipper up? So I don't know if that was the joke, but you've got me completely thrown off circle. Jerk. So if it's bad, you can blame John. He's distracted me. I don't take any credit for what I'm about to say. That's a nice disclaimer. Good morning. Okay, guys. Continuing with a series on Advent Conspiracy. Advent Conspiracy, for those who've been around, maybe or should be hopefully familiar with it. For those that are new, the idea is very simple. The explanation's there in the bulletin. But the idea of Advent Conspiracy is that we've allowed the culture to kind of to overtake this holy sacred season, and not the Advent and Christmas sacred season of celebrating the coming of Christ with its consumerism. And so Advent Conspiracy is about going back to that season and the heart of it, to where we actually celebrate it in a way that would reflect the way that Christ would have us to celebrate it. And so that is in looking out for the poor, the oppressed, the marginalized that are in the world and in our communities. And so it invites us to consider 4 principles of spending less, of giving more, of loving all, and in doing that we're able to worship fully what the intent and the message of Christ and his life represents. So last week we talked about spending less, and not so much in the way of finances, although that's certainly part of Advent Conspiracy, but spending less in the sense of our time. And I spoke of the SHAPE training that we're going to be doing this Saturday, which you can still sign up for. Today's the last day to get signed up for that. We've got a great class already committed, but we'll spend the day actually going through the SHAPE exercise, which walks you through an understanding of yourself and a discovering of your certain unique gifts and abilities and your unique story, and how that plays into the place where God is inviting you and into ministering in the world. And so once you know who you are, then you're able to say no to things that you know don't fit who you are, so that you're spending less of your time, less of your energy and your resources on things that exhaust you, and more on your time on things that you're gifted for, that you're empowered for, and that God has uniquely created you for. And so last week we talked about spend less, which means this week we talk about giving more, which seems weird, that we talk about spending less, and then in the same breath we turn around and say, and also you should give more, because those seem contrary. But again, it goes back to that understanding of when you know what you're coming out of, how you're serving, the story, and what it is, what wilderness you have been led through, and the direction that you're heading, you're able to give more of yourself, which is a more true self, a more real self as God has designed you and created you to be, so that you can offer that to others. And in addition, if you do want to take the financial aspect of that, the giving more is about making sure that you are spending gifts and time and energy and giving of yourself to other people, and giving gifts that actually are needed and matter. And so one of the ways that we do this as a family is Cami and I have partnered with World Vision since the beginning of our marriage. We've had adopted kids that we have spent our monthly sponsorship to over the years. But in addition to that, every year at Christmas, we allow the kids to pick out gifts from their Christmas catalog. That then takes that gift, whatever it may be, and it ranges from just clothes and food all the way to seeds and agricultural training, so that they can actually learn how to continue to make more resources for themselves and their community. They have partnerships all throughout the world. The kids get a pick. We usually come up to an amount of what that is, and the kids get to go through the magazine. They pick out the gift that they want to offer, and we do that through World Vision because that's one of the ways that we get to give back, to give more in a way that makes a difference. In addition to that, you'll see also that the angel tree is set up outside my office, which is a partnership with the Boys and Girls Club. And I want to talk a little bit about this because it's key to the ministry, because we changed the way that we did that. We began reading a couple of books about how we partner with the poor. And one of the statements in the book called Toxic Charity said that oftentimes when we have services or ministry to the poor, they are more or less traps than they are gifts of freedom. He backs up and he says, let me explain. He says, when we're ministering to the poor, for it to be a successful ministry, it should be leading to a place where they no longer need those resources. If we're actually honestly helping and serving the poor and the oppressed in the world, they should actually get to a point where they're no longer in that situation in life. That we've actually helped them to get out of that space. But oftentimes we don't. We create ministries, food banks, charitable organizations that make sure that they just stay trapped. They never get out of their place of poverty and a lack of resources. And so he challenges in the book to rethink some of the ways that particularly churches do a lot of their ministry with the more oppressed in our communities, because we're the worst. We're the worst offenders when it comes to this. And he said that the angel trees, as most churches operate and share with them, most of them are oppressive in that sense. That we get a tag that says, girl, 13 years old, size whatever, jeans, age whatever. And so then we go to the store, and we, based on that very limited criteria, we go to the jeans section, and we buy a pair of jeans. My mom doesn't buy clothes for me because she won't get the right ones. And so when we do this with angel trees, we're limiting the sense of self, the sense of personality, the style that all of us have, that every person has. And we essentially say, well, because you're at your position in life, you should just be thankful you're getting jeans. So we dismiss that, we devalue them in doing that. The other thing that we do, and if you've ever done one of these drops, you've seen it, where you've come into a home with all these gifts, and you feel like Santa, and you think, this is amazing, like they're going to be so thankful. And you walk into the house, and usually the kids are gone because they don't want the kids to see the gifts. They want them to come home and be shocked and awe. And so usually when you come to the home, it's usually mom, just mom, no dad. Not because dad's not around, but because for most men, for most dads, they want to be the ones who are providing for their kids. And the sense of pride that squashes by essentially showing up, strangers they don't know, actually bringing gifts that don't maybe line up with the unique styles and personalities of the families that are serving, robs him of that dignity, robs him of that place of being the father who's able to provide. So that gives you a couple of areas of how we devalue and strip them of that in the normal practices. And it's not intentionally that we're doing that. And there is this argument where we say, well, they should just be thankful they're getting something. Yes, but that's hard. And so we've revamped, I don't know how, 3-4 years, Megan? This will be our 4th year where we've revamped this in a way that where we've said, we're not going to put tags of the families on there where you're going to get a very vague description, and then you're going to go out shop and hoping that you throw the dart in the dark and maybe line up with what their fashion sense and personality is. Instead, we're going to ask you for money. The money that you would spend anyway, we're going to collect the money. And then we're going to take the families out. We're actually going to host them. We're going to go to the store with them. We're going to set it up. We do it in partnership with the Boys and Girls Club because we're already there. We're building relationships. We're pouring into those lives. We're connecting with them. And they know their families. They know who needs help. They know who could use these resources the most. And so they give us the families that they offer. And we go out giving a host to each family. And we essentially give the families that money, in a sense saying, you have $75 a person for the people in your family. You buy whatever it is that you know that they need. Whatever it is. And so we've had, because this is the other dilemma, right? When I'm doing this for the angel tree, I may say, well, the clearance rack has all these options. But I don't want to be a cheapskate and look like a cheapskate, so I'm not going to buy from the clearance. So we've had parents that come in and they're like, let's go to the clearance rack. And it's like, and they walk out of there with these buggy full cartfuls. I call them buggies. In Missouri, we call these buggies. And I realize in Indiana, they don't call them buggies. But they call these cartfuls, and they're like, look at how much we were able to get. And it's like, yeah, we would have never gotten that much because we wouldn't have wanted to shop clearance for you and devalue that. Where you shop for these families and you have the teenager who's there helping mom or dad shop and says, can I sacrifice my $75 so that it can buy a Christmas tree for my family that we can put up in the house? Value. Answering the story and the questions that are actually being asked and meeting the people exactly where they're at. Giving the parents the empowerment to actually to go do the shopping. Giving more, not just in the sense of finance, but giving value to people when you minister to them. That's what Advent Conspiracy is. That's what we're practicing. That's what we're inviting and calling us to. And that we don't just do that in the service community projects, but you do that within your family. That you give gifts that matter. That you give gifts that match the personality and the interest and the place of the people in your family, so that you know that it serves a purpose, as opposed to just giving them that tie or sweater or whatever that you wrap up. And so we do it in that regard. The title of the sermon I titled is Blank Others as You Wish to Be Blanked. I heard a speaker at a conference say, we usually use this as love others as you wish to be loved. In the Socratic or in the philosophical world, they use the negative of this. Don't treat others the way you don't want to be treated. Jesus makes this positive when he offers this teaching. Tony Campolo says, you can put anything in this. You should put clothe in this. Clothe others as you wish to be clothed. Feed others as you wish to be fed. Speak to others the way that you wish to be spoken to. It helps to understand and define what actually love looks like. Because oftentimes we just make love this emotional, feel-good thing. But the love of God, the agape love of God, actually is very personable. It's very relational. It's very tangible. It's very real in the way that it works. And it's not an emotional thing as much as it is an intentional action of goodness towards others, including our enemies. I want to tell you about Mary. Mary was born on March 9th, 1932 in Granite City, Illinois. She was born, obviously, during the Great Depression. She was the youngest of 5 siblings, raised by her oldest sister by about 20 years. Her name was Ione. The family didn't have a lot of money. Nobody had a lot of money. It was the Great Depression. So they couldn't even afford a pet cat. So they had a pet skunk. Had the stinkers removed, glands removed. I don't know who does that. That's not the job I want. Mary was a self-proclaimed tomboy. Loved playing kick the can, which I don't know what that is. But it sounds like a kick a can. I wasn't that poor growing up. And we kicked something else growing up. I don't know. We had at least kickballs. So a tomboy who played kick the can, always had skin knees. She had this sense of vigilante justice where she was willing to go and kick the butt of whatever bully was causing trouble in the neighborhood among the other kids. And she was little, short. Her junior year of high school, the Sadie Hawkins dance came up. She wanted Don to go with her. So she finally asked him. Don didn't want to really go with her. He had his eyes on another young lady. But she had a date. So Don was left without a date. He wasn't really interested in going to the dance, but Mary asked, and so he obliged and said he would. They were going to go with a group of friends. So despite this being their junior year, growing up in Granite City, they had never met before. The more interesting thing is they were both born in the same hospital on the same day in that city. And it took to their junior year to actually meet. Don and Mary ended up marrying one another. They had 3 kids together and were members of the Presbyterian Church. Don served as an elder in the church. Women couldn't be leaders in the church. They also led the youth in programming and trips up until the 1970s. At some point in the 70s, there was some tension, a fallout in the church that led to Don and Mary and their family's exodus from the Presbyterian Church. And not from the Presbyterian Church, but just from the church in general. They left the church not looking back, and the only remnant of the faith was a prayer that would be offered at dinner anytime the family gathered. You wouldn't see Scripture being read. You wouldn't hear of faith conversations, just a prayer when the family gathered for a meal. In 2004, Don had health issues that required surgery and a time in the hospital. And unfortunately, Mary lost Don on September 24th in 2004. During Don's illness and his time in the hospital, the minister of Don and Mary's daughter came alongside Mary. The minister would show up daily at the hospital. On days that he knew that Don was having surgery, he would make sure that he was there for the surgery to offer support and prayer and just to be there with the family. When he was unable to be there, he would do what he could to follow up with phone calls as a source of comfort and the ability to just be a presence time and time again. After Don's passing, Mary returned to the church due to the care and the presence of this minister. She went back to the Presbyterian Church, the one that she and Don had been a part of so many years ago. And after 30 years of being in exile away from the church, she found the conversation of the church to be very awkward and confusing. The church was more interested, she postured, in its resources and ignoring those who were outside of the church organization, building, religion, whatever, even those who were members but weren't there routinely. Mary had all sorts of questions of 30 years of being away that she wanted to explore, but the church said that the questions that she was asking were the wrong ones, and they began to prescribe the questions that she should be asking, which usually centered around doctrines and theologies. When what she really wanted to know was, how do we love people the way Christ did? At the age of 75, Mary began a care and visitation ministry in her church for the shut-ins and others who were unable to come to the church location. She empowered a team of over 20 in her church, and the church was about 60 people. So she empowered a third of the church to know how to go and visit, to listen, to pray, and to be with those people, a presence. And even though they weren't allowed because they were non-commissioned lay people, would be these rogue agents of offering communion to these shut-ins and those that they visited. In addition, the church sat in a downtown area that had a number of houses and young families around it. And the church had this large city lot with trees and a garden out front. And so she began to host an Easter egg hunt every year, planting trees all over the place, getting a bunny to come and take pictures, providing a breakfast for the families to come and to fellowship and to engage with this centerpiece of the community that had had no interest or no engagement with its neighbors before. And she began to host blood drives in the honor and the memory of Don, knowing how much blood he had used when he was in the hospital going through his surgery, knowing that that could save a life, could make a difference for someone else. At the age of 75, she began these things. In most churches, by the age of about 60, everyone starts retiring from doing ministry engagement work. Oh, I've done enough. I've done so much. I've done my time. I shuffle off into the sunset. At 75, Mary says, there's work to be done. There's work to get started. We're missing opportunities. We're missing a chance to be the hands and feet of Christ in the community. So she began these things because she saw that the need was there and she knew that she could do it. And oftentimes it was to the frustration of the minister. You can't serve communion, Mary, to these people. You're not commissioned. She said, then take it up with Jesus. Mary is my Meemaw. This is the woman who, when I told her about my call to ministry in high school, she informed me that I was wasting my time. She said that certainly God wouldn't call me to that because I was smarter than that. There was no money in ministry, and that I had a chance to be a doctor or a lawyer or someone who would do something of value in people's life. We didn't talk a whole lot as I entered into my studies of ministry. And as she came back to her faith, it changed our relationship. She came with this curious wonder, and she came with this fresh perspective that I began to see exactly how the church was not having the same conversation that people outside of our walls were having. And I was thankful that Mary, at the age of 75, was not willing to just say, well, I'm in the later years of my life. I can just be content with what I'm doing. I've done enough. Leave it for the next generation. She continues to lead those ministry. She's tried a couple of times to step away to pass it on, and they've said, oh, Mary, we're not done yet. We're not quite sure how to offer communion. And so they keep her roped in. They keep her engaged. They keep her involved. Shane Claiborne says in his book, The Irresistible Revolution, Living as an Ordinary Radical, that he's offered a survey to people within the church. And in that, he asked the participants who claimed to be strong followers of Jesus whether or not Jesus spent time with the poor, and 80% of them said yes. Later in the survey, he'd sneak in another question, and he would ask the same group of strong followers whether they spent time with the poor, and less than 2% said they did. Shane says he learned a powerful lesson. He says we can admire and worship Jesus without doing what he did. We can applaud what he preached. We love what he stood for, caring about the same things. We can adore the cross, and we can be willing and voiced to say that we're taking up ours. But he said he came to realize the great tragedy of the church is not that rich Christians do not care about the poor, but the rich Christians do not know the poor. And I think that's what our world is desperately in need of. Lovers, people who are building deep, genuine relationships with fellow strugglers along the way who actually know the faces of the people behind the issues that they're concerned about. And when I say poor, I'm not just talking about those who are financially poor, although that certainly was a highlight of Jesus' ministry. But I'm talking to, as Matthew referred to it, the poor in spirit. The people who are going through life and their souls are crying out for something more than what they found that this life has to offer them. That the rat race that we're in, that the commercials that we hear, that the lifestyles that they promote, they leave us lacking to some regard and in some degree. And that when we step into that life with Christ, we begin to see life that can be lived differently. Shane Claiborne continues, he says, most good things have been said far too many times. They just need to be lived out. Mother Teresa always said that Calcuttas are everywhere if only we have the eyes to see, that we should find your Calcutta. So all around you in your day-to-day, there are people who are tiptoeing through life. Maybe some of us, tiptoeing through life, just waiting to arrive at death safely. And I would encourage you to not tiptoe, to run, to hop, to skip, to dance, but not tiptoe. To go ferociously through life. As Martin Luther said, to sin boldly and lean on the grace of God. Not calling us to pursue sin, but saying that sin has no power over God's grace, and so we don't have to go through life afraid of how we might make mistakes. The writer of Hebrews calls us in this regard in chapter 10, that we may spur one another on towards love and to good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some in the habit are doing, but encouraging one another as we wait for the day that is approaching. Spend less. Stop wasting your time and your energy and your resources on things that don't give you life, that don't give purpose and meaning to others, that don't allow goodness to be poured out of you into others if you receive it from God. Spend more of your effort and your energy and your resources, that while you're walking this earth, you have a chance to make a difference. Don't let that pass you by. And as you do that, you will love others more fully, and you will worship God more closely as you step into that rhythm. Let's pray. God, thank you for today, and thank you for people like my Meemaw, who at the age of 75 saw the beauty and the light of Christ and chose to take up a ministry there where she saw a need. God, thank you for those who have been convicted by the Advent conspiracy to realize that we can worship Christ and the Advent and the Christmas season in a way that is more reflective of what Christ has to offer us as the church, as a light in the world. So God, may we be convicted, may we be compelled to recognize that, not out of guilt and out of shame, but out of a grand vision that draws us to the light, so that we may live differently, that we may live life more fully, that our relationships may grow deeper as we interact with those who are searching and struggling and seeking for something that is more beyond than what they found to be satisfiable in this life. I pray these things in Christ's name. Amen. May you discover your Calcuttas wherever you go, that you may use what God has given you and entrusted you with in your life so that you may serve others with his love. May God be with you. Go in God's peace.